So in this, our final session, we're considering the question, what is the invitation that comes to me through Jesus? When I was speaking to you last, a couple of sessions ago, we spoke of the central mystery of Christian faith as the resurrection of Jesus. However, if Jesus has risen from the dead, it is that we might rise from death to life. How does Jesus lead us from death into life? Let's perhaps begin by reflecting how death is something that is already present in our life. It's present, in fact, in all of those deathly experiences of our life, the experiences which numb us, which paralyze us, which render us inert, passive, only half living, half dead. These are the experiences rendered us by our fears, our angers, our bitternesses, our resentments, our cynicism. The risen Christ stands before us and calls us out of death into life. He calls us out of the experiences of fear into its opposite, which is love, out of bitterness into forgiveness, from despair into hope, from shame into dignity. The whole of the New Testament, and indeed the entire Christian tradition, imagine this paschal movement, this movement from death into life in a number of ways. In the Gospel themselves, the movement is imagined as a movement from darkness to light, as St. Paul would write, from hardness of heart to receptivity, or from slumber to wakefulness, or from fear to love, as St. John would write. But there is, I believe, a way of imagining this movement from death into life, or this paschal movement, that lays underneath all these various expressions, or perhaps more accurately lies at the very heart of them. However the side of death is imagined, whether it be in fear or bitterness or resentment, despair, darkness and so forth, the end result of that whole side for us is isolation and fragmentation. Fear, bitterness, despair, all work to isolate us, to marginalize us, to estrange us, to keep us locked into the dark room of only ourselves. And the more isolated that we are in our life, the more fragmented we become, the less whole we experience ourselves. The risen Christ calls us out of isolation. The risen Christ calls us into the experience of what it means to be in communion, the experience of being in relationship, the experience of communion, of hospitality, of relationship, is indeed the fruit of all those things which are the characteristic of life in the Paschal mystery. Love, hope, forgiveness. Love, hope, forgiveness, for example, all create a new and profound openness in our life, a capacity to be with others and to be for others. And is it not in this way that we witness to the living presence of Jesus most strongly? Believing that we have dignity, or that dignity is possible beyond our shame, that love is possible beyond fear, that openness is possible beyond resentment, gives us then a framework for a whole new way of living, different than if we did not imagine that this was possible. Perhaps I can best illustrate this by sharing with you a wonderful story. It's the story that comes from an internment camp during the war. Miriam lives in hut 18, bed 22. She and all of her friends are hungry and are dreaming of how wonderful it would be to be able to eat chicken again. Little Sarah and David are among her companions. They are only 4 years old and have known no other home. Unlike Miriam, they've never known a proper bedroom or what it is to have toys. They keep saying to Miriam, "Tell us again, Miriam. Tell us again about your teddy bear with a squeak in the middle. Tell us about your doll that has eyes that blink. Tell us about your soft pink elephant sits on the windowsill and the owl that swings from the ceiling. So Miriam tells them. Sarah stares at her and David hugs his mother's old black shawl that keeps him warm. Well, perhaps we can let Miriam tell the rest of the story. She says, I run away to be on my own because I know Sarah and David want a toy more than anything else in the world. And in this place there are no toys. That's why we're planning a party, a very special party, the women and I. When the soldiers come to set us free, and they are coming soon, everyone says so, they will open the gates, and for dinner we will cook chickens for everyone. And every child in the hut will get a toy of their own. We're making the toys now, the women and I. We're collecting bits and pieces, scraps of material, rags, tiny strands of thread, wool, anything. And we shall make toys, incredible toys, the women and I. Old Jacoba says, we're mad. Why do you worry about toys, she scolds. We're starving. It's food we need, not your foolish toys. But we laugh at her, the women and I. And we go on begging buttons and torn pockets because there is nothing we can do about the food. There is no food. But we can make toys, and we shall. We are cutting and sewing, all of us, every night while the guards sleep. Even old Jacoba is helping. But still we don't have enough material. So now we go on cutting our own clothes. My skirt is getting shorter and shorter. David is puzzled. He thinks my legs are growing longer and longer, remarkably fast. But eventually the soldiers come. And that night at our party, our very special party, the women and I bring out the toys. David wraps up his precious owl in his mother's old black shawl. Sarah hugs her funny patchwork elephant and vows to keep it always on her windowsill. The women and I wink at one another and we help each other to chicken soup, and so the celebrations begin. Well, Miriam here tells us of a story of liberation, a story of joy, a story of humanity. She and the other women in the camp lived on a word of hope that the soldiers were coming. They would soon be free. Where this word came from, we're not told. How reliable the word may have been, we've no idea. But the word of possible liberation enabled these captive women to live very differently from how they had up until when this word had been announced to them. The word of hope, which filtered through to them through the barbed wires, enabled them to be reckless, to forget a life of mere survival, and to begin to entertain the very idea of celebration. The word of hope helped them to reprioritize. It gave them the freedom already to delight in life, to care more fully for each other, and even to create beauty in the midst of their poverty and misery. In the midst of agony, the word of hope enabled them to laugh. It is amazing what a word of hope can do for a people who are otherwise trapped. And we too have been given a word of hope. And that word is that Jesus lives now. He is present to us now. And it is the word that likewise changes the way in which we see our life and which changes the way in which we do things. It's a word which opens up for us new possibility, even in the midst of what might be extraordinary limitation. And as for Miriam and the other women in the camp of the story, the word of hope that we have been given enables us to celebrate even in the face of frustration, distortion, or limitation. It's the word which reminds us deep in our hearts that forgiveness is stronger than vengeance, that love is more enduring than hatred, that hope is brighter than despair, that life is stronger than death. This, indeed, is the light of the resurrection, and it dawns in the midst of our shadows. I think of the parents, for example, who receive the trauma of a disabled child and whose lives are never the same again, as they spend all their energy in the care of their child. In their life, a light has shone in the darkness. I think of the mother or father of a teenager who is discovered with mental illness and who spends so many years in anxiety, never really resting, coping with the unpredictability of their child's condition. In their life, a light shines in the darkness of a question that resists its answer. I think of the person whose own mother or father is aged and frail and who turns their life upside down as they commit to an unknown future caring for the parent. The person who forgets their own needs and spends many years in care of someone whom they love. In their life too, a light shines in the darkness of anxiety. I think of the spouse who watches in agony as their partner falls victim to a dementia and who stays awake in so many hidden ways, day and night, to enable the one falling ill with dignity. Through their love, a light shines in the darkness of despair. I think of the person in a failed relationship who, despite the intensity of the hurt, refuses to extract vengeance on their partner and who patiently and gently works for what might bring the most healing to all in the situation. In their openness, a light shines in the darkness of bitterness. I think of those people who spend untold hours in volunteer capacity for many different causes, raising money, giving of their time, often with no gratitude or acknowledgement, but only with the commitment to make lighter the suffering of others. In their self-donation, a light shines in the darkness of our own selfishness. So in each of these persons, a light shines in the darkness. And it is through Jesus that we proclaim the power of this light. It's a light that shines in the darkness of our own self-preoccupation, through the lives of those whose self-giving reflects God's own self-giving to us. We all know them. They're not far from us. They live in our streets, they live in our neighbourhoods, they are members of our own family. They may even be us. Through the story of Jesus, though, we are the people who believe in this light and who live by the hope that it shines. That hope will enable us to act differently from all the predicted concerns of the world that are dictated to us. And it's that hope, the hope that that light gives us, that leads us into a life of celebration. It's a celebration of the freedom we have now because of that hope, of the beauty that we can create now because of that hope, of the joy that we can share now because of that hope. And all of this is the power that releases us from the imprisonment of our isolation. It's the power that cures us from the paralysis of our own self-preoccupation, the power that enables us to dance in our life, the power that turns grief into joy. It's the power that irrigates the dryness of our spirits. It's the power that turns despair into hope, shame into dignity, estrangement into communion. It is the power that brings what was dead back to life again.